Marcus Freeman stood once again inside Hard Rock Stadium, the same building where a season of promise first cracked open months earlier, and the symmetry of the moment was impossible to ignore. The lights were brighter this time, the stakes higher, the crowd louder, but for Freeman, the setting carried a familiar sting. This was where Notre Dame's 2026 journey began with disappointment, where a narrow loss to Miami planted the seed of doubt that would linger all season long. On Monday night, as Miami and Indiana prepared to play for the national championship, Freeman wasn't wearing a headset on the sideline or pacing in front of his players. Instead, he was seated under ESPN lights, invited as a guest analyst, watching the sport's biggest game unfold while his own team remained on the outside looking in. And from that seat, with clarity shaped by frustration and reflection, Freeman distilled an entire season into a simple, unflinching message: leave no doubt. The phrase was not new, but standing in that stadium again gave it sharper edges. Freeman spoke calmly, deliberately, as if every word had been rehearsed not for television, but for his locker room back in South Bend. Notre Dame's absence from the college football playoffs still hovered over the program, but Freeman made it clear that lingering anger was not the path forward. Disappointment, he said, had its place, but only briefly. After a day or so, it had to fade, replaced by accountability and resolve. There was no benefit in dwelling on what could not be changed. What mattered was understanding why the Irish were not there and ensuring that the same story would not repeat itself. For Freeman, the explanation was painfully straightforward. Notre Dame had left doubt. The Irish opened the season with back-to-back losses, falling to Miami in this very stadium and then to Texas A&M shortly after. Both defeats were close, decided by a handful of points, but in college football's unforgiving calculus, close losses are still losses, and early impressions can be impossible to erase. Those first two games followed Notre Dame all year like a shadow. Even as the Irish regrouped and surged through the rest of the schedule, winning 10 straight games and rediscovering their identity, the memory of September lingered in every ranking release, every committee discussion, every debate about resumes and eye tests. Freeman did not sugarcoat that reality. He acknowledged the frustration of standing in front of his players after the final rankings were revealed, knowing how hard they had worked, knowing how much progress they had made, and still not having a satisfying explanation for why their season ended without a playoff invitation. There are moments in coaching, Freeman admitted, when the answers simply are not there, when all you can offer is honesty. This, he emphasized, was never about Notre Dame deserving a spot over Miami or Alabama or any other contender. It was about expectations shaped by momentum. The rankings had suggested that if Notre Dame kept winning, if it stayed on the path it was on, a playoff berth would follow, and then it didn't. Miami's Week 1 victory over the Irish ultimately became the defining separator. When the final rankings were unveiled, the Hurricanes leapt ahead of Notre Dame, their head-to-head win serving as the committee's justification. Miami seized that opportunity, advancing through the playoff and validating the decision by reaching the national championship game. From a distance, the logic held. From South Bend, it still hurt. Freeman understood both truths could coexist. College football is not always about fairness as much as it is about clarity, and Notre Dame, in his view, had failed to provide enough of it early in the season. That failure was not about effort or belief, Freeman insisted, but about execution in moments that mattered most. Losing by 4 or 5 points may feel differently in the locker room, but it does not register differently in the standings. Those margins become decisive when championships are at stake. Freeman returned to that idea repeatedly, not as an excuse, but as a lesson. The Irish had put themselves in a position where their fate depended on interpretation, on comparison, on committee deliberation. That, he said, was the mistake. Elite programs do not leave their seasons to interpretation, they remove debate entirely. Sitting on ESPN's set, Freeman spoke with the calm authority of a coach who has processed disappointment and turned it into purpose. He did not sound bitter. He sounded resolved. The message he shared publicly mirrored the one he had already delivered privately. The season was over, the result was final. What remained was the responsibility to learn from it. Freeman described how quickly the tone inside the program shifted from frustration to focus, how the emphasis moved towards what Notre Dame could control going forward. There was no value in replaying the snubs or relitigating rankings. The value lay in preparation, urgency, and precision. The setting made the message resonate even more. Hard Rock Stadium was not just the site of the national championship, it was the birthplace of Notre Dame's uphill climb. Freeman returning there underscored the cyclical nature of the sport, how one moment can echo months later in unexpected ways. Watching Miami compete for a title only reinforced the consequences of that early loss. It was a reminder that every game, especially in September, carries weight that may not be fully understood until December or January. Freeman's presence at the title game also symbolized his role in the broader college football conversation. As a young head coach navigating an increasingly complex landscape, he understands the optics of every decision and every appearance. Yet on this night, the focus was not on controversy or protest or narrative, it was on accountability. Freeman did not deflect blame onto the system or the committee. He placed it squarely on his program's shoulders. Notre Dame, he said plainly, had not done enough to make the decision easy. That honesty resonated because it aligned with Freeman's broader philosophy. Since taking over in South Bend, he has emphasized ownership, discipline, and growth through adversity. Missing the playoff, painful as it was, became another test of that philosophy. How a program responds to disappointment often reveals more than how it handles success. Freeman believes the response will define Notre Dame's next chapter. The calendar already offers a chance at redemption. Miami will visit South Bend on November 7th next season, a date that has been circled since the moment the schedules aligned. Freeman did not dwell on revenge or rhetoric, but the implication was clear. That game will not just be another non-conference matchup, it will be an opportunity to rewrite the story that began in Miami Gardens. This time, the Irish will have the chance to answer doubt directly, on their own field, with no ambiguity. As the national championship game unfolded, Freeman watched with the perspective of someone who understands both the privilege and the pain of elite college football. He knows how narrow the margins are, how quickly seasons can turn, and how unforgiving the sport can be when opportunities slip away. The Irish experienced that reality firsthand. They recovered admirably from an 0-2 start, rattling off 10 straight games and rediscovering their identity. Yet consistency alone was not enough. In a system designed to separate the very best from the merely excellent, Notre Dame found itself just short. Freeman's takeaway was not despair, but clarity. Leave no doubt. Do not let close losses define you. Do not allow early mistakes to linger unresolved. Win in ways that remove questions before they can be asked. That mantra will shape Notre Dame's off-season, its preparation, and its mindset heading into 2026. It will influence how games are approached, how urgency is maintained, and how standards are enforced from the first practice to the final whistle. Standing in Miami, Freeman embodied that resolve. He was not there to lament what had been lost, but to articulate what must be gained. The disappointment of missing the playoff had already been absorbed. What remained was the responsibility to ensure it never happened again. For Notre Dame, the path forward is clear, even if it is demanding. The Irish cannot afford to leave anything to chance, to perception, or to debate. If they want to be part of college football's biggest stage next time, they must claim it inescapably.